Hello, welcome. So this might not be what you expect. We did say that it was for beginners. It's not a massive in-depth, this is how to write Beaker. It's a look at Beaker. And in a really brave manner, it's not just one workshop demo, it's actually going to be free. I use show off for all my presentations, so a couple of slides from now, I'll give you a GitHub URL and you can pull the whole thing down and have a look while we're playing. And you can play along, it depends what you've got set up on your laptops. And then there's some extra bits that will be done afterwards, but it gets interesting. So who am I? As my colleague said, I'm Adam from the London office. I'm formerly from Electronic Arts and a little company called Playfish who ruined Facebook by introducing games to it. Every time you get an email piece of spam from a Facebook game, my fault, really proud. I do crazy, say again?
I hope you're rich because of it.
No, because I only worked there, I didn't own it. It means I've had some experience with cloud, experience with automation, passed around EA, making teams launch stuff, watching people cry into their hats as they realized that boxed games were not the same as live games. So I'm quite a fan of automation and definitely a fan of testing it before you put it in live and it blows up your world and you spend your Friday night not drinking beer. And that's pretty much the reason I do anything, is so I can go to the pub or the coffee shop. Both are fairly equal in my life. So, know before you push go. Beaker for us is an acceptance testing harness that happens to roll into it unit testing as well and RSpec. And we had RSpec, we had PuppetRspec, and we had server spec. And what we wanted to do was make it easier, always making it easier, because the less barrier to entry to testing there is, the more likely you're likely to do. And so, just as a quick thing, who already uses Puppet? I know it's a bit of a loaded question in this building. Yeah? Okay, but who already does testing? Who wraps their testing in monitoring? So who's testing anything properly then? Yeah, and that's my stance. And that's where Beaker helps us as too. Okay? Because if you're not monitoring your tests, you can't tell if you've actually set the firewall test properly. It just confirms to your test. But we'll get past that. So that's my GitHub. A Buxton KBYPG. Know before you press go. I'm not very original and I hate long titles. If you want to pull it down and have a look, feel free. There is a PDF up there as well. But the PDF's already online as well. So, and what we're going to do, so like I said, we're going to do a couple of tests. I'm going to do a quick demo. And the first demo I'm going to do is actually showing you what's already in our supported modules. The fact that for you to use Beaker, you don't have to do any work. It's all done. Then we'll go through Beaker and its components. Has anybody actually tried using Beaker yet? Has anybody tried reading the wiki document? Yeah? It's a bit bitmeal. We did really roll with it, you can tell. We wrote tons of it, and then we stopped. But it's there. We'll show you some tools to mean that using this is actually easier for you. Has anybody heard of Gareth Rushgrove? Anybody heard of the Puppet module skeleton? Huh? Anybody know that there's a tool there that will deliver you all of Beaker set up in one line? Yeah? And that's what we're going to show you as a demo as well. That's what we'll show you in putting this all together. So, first demo, if I can work the monitors out and we can get a terminal session up and things like that. Oh, so far so good. We've got a screen. Let's have another screen. So let's have this screen. Does anybody know English Kids TV? Yes. Superb. We have a program called Blue Peter, where you do it all beforehand and then you try to deliver it in live. So this is a bit of a Blue Peter setup just for that. Let's bring that a bit bigger for you all. There we go, we can read that now, that's better. So, I've installed the module already. And there we go. For anybody who's using Macs and knows that GitHub's Buxton project, I use Buxton. So I don't have to do any work to get my Mac up and running, but it gives me Puppet. So I've got MySQL from Puppet Labs installed, okay? And what we're going to do is we're going to test against that module. And for those of you who don't have that and you've got a VM ready, just install the module with the module tool, okay? And you can do, this will work for you as long as you've got the other bits and pieces we need. So we're going to go there. We're going to go, Oh, hello. Sorry, I'm just trying to see my screen. It's a bit interesting. Now I've just lost all my screen off the bottom. That's not going to help me a lot at all. Right, there we go. So I go to here. Yeah, and straight away, that's a module. You've all seen them, I hope. You've all run a module, you've installed a module, you've generated a module. But there's a couple of differences compared to a normal module in there, in the fact that there's a gem file and a rake file. And we'll come to those a little bit later. But what they let me do is use Bundler. Yeah. And I can bundle install it and I'll make sure all the bits that I need are in place. And then because I've done that, and I know that I've run this test about half a dozen times and it works, I can do this. So we're taking advantage of rake as well, for those who know rake, and we'll come back to this in a little bit. But what we're going to do is we're going to do a bundle exec, because if you've used Beaker recently, we've moved to bundle as the manager for it, and that means I use bundle to run it as well. And I'm going to run rspec, and I'm going to run rspec on my spec folder. Yep, and I'm going to run it on my acceptance tests. I'm just going to run it. And then in true Blue Peter fashion, it's going to do this, which is it downloading a vagrant box for me, and it's going to take some time, and it's going to take ages, and it's going to do all the things. And I'm going to cheat. I'm going to come back over here, and I'm going to pull this window over there. And I'm going to make that window disappear, because this window has my tests in it. And anybody who's run rspec, it'll just look to you a lot like rspec, except there'll be some new words in here maybe. Yeah, you can see it build the vagrant box, because we chose in this test that I chose to use a vagrant box because that's what you get for free. You know, it builds my host, and it builds my host exactly as I need it. It puts in all the things I need on my host, and then it installs all the extra pieces, and then it pulls Puppet into place. And then it starts to fire some tests. Yeah? And it shows you what it's running as a test. And it colorizes it. So there you go. There's a yum install because we've told it to run that way from a script. And you get some spacing because it's rubbish that way. But then we get the things that actually matter to Beaker start showing up. It's telling you what it's doing. Yeah? In a human readable format, more importantly than anything. So it's breaking out the bits of the log files you need, the bits you're actually interested in, so you don't have to go searching for them. Yeah, there you go. That's what I'm running Puppet code for MySQL server class, account security class. And that's what it's doing. It's doing a Fedora release, pulling some, etc. Red Hat release. And then it tells you, yep, apply manifest PP, did that, tells you what it gets out, ignores some Puppet code, blanks it out for you, so you don't have to worry about it, you know. But it is in there if you want to read it. It's just, it blanks it out because it's input that normally it expects you to grep through, but it's there for you to read it if you want. But it's telling you in English what I'm doing. Should do that, executes this, creates that, and you get a little bit of a different language out of it. And then obviously once that's all run, you get what you'd hope for at the end, which is 97 tests have actually run in 25 minutes with no failures on that box. And that's your demo, you know, that's Beaker running. And that's with doing nothing. I just ran it. All of our supported modules are in that state. So if you want to use something supported from the Forge, you get that for free. We're hoping that the new module path that we mentioned a couple of days ago now, that will become part of that as well. So the accepted modules will have testing in them and Beaker. So when you try to use an accepted module from the community, you'll get all this too. And we think that's got some value to you as users. So, first demo worked, or cheated anyway. Should we see if it actually worked? See if it's there. Yep, running. There we go. Still waiting. Vagrant file downloading. Anybody who'd think the network was really busy when you're all sat there using your laptops while watching a talk. So that's okay. So what we're demonstrating for you is Beaker, yeah, on a testing environment. And we're going to go through them all in more detail when I move on. The RSpec Beaker tests. It's RSpec. It's not a new language. It's still RSpec. Reusability features, that gem file, the rake file, things that are always transported with the tests. Puppet Labs MySQL, it works every time, consistently. The only slowness there is the vagrant box building. Yeah? So if you're using it for yourself, it's a thing you can do. I like the guy taking the photo of the slide. Go download them off GitHub. And supported modules. So that means that we've already got 14 of these available to you for things like NTP and all of the Puppet services. They're all there, they're all testable. You can check your master before you run it. And because they're acceptance tests, you can put them into profiles and run both tests and check you haven't broken it when you introduce something new. Oh, killed it. Okay. There we go, working again. Yay. So, the bits of that make this work for you. Moving on to tools. Bundler. Anybody use Bundler? Yeah? Do some Ruby development. All Bundler is a tracking file. Yeah? It's a single file that has all the things you need written in it. So if I go over here, I'm in that MySQL folder. I always forget that it's capitalized. I left the gem file. It's telling me the gems I'm bringing in. And when I run bundler install, it does this. Yeah? It pulls down those ones it needs. And all of their dependencies as well, which is why that list's a lot longer than that. Yeah. And the fact that that's locked into your module means that the next person you give it to gets all that and doesn't have to think about it. You can install it all by hand. Feel free. Have a nice day. Vagrant. Who's used Vagrant? Who uses AWS? Who uses vhosts? Who still uses physical tin? I'm only using Vagrant because I'm lazy. And otherwise, I'd have to really worry about a network connection. Yeah? I could just as simply use AWS. I could have gone there, and I could have had a look. And the SUTs, or the nodes, we use Vagrant for a tool because it's easy and it works. But you can use Docker for those of you on the Real Cool Kids team. Okay, you can use anything you like, and currently we support it with Beaker, and we're moving where we'll keep that as well. MySQL, because it's available, everybody has it, everybody's done MySQL. Who doesn't use MySQL in their workplace somewhere? I know it's becoming less of a thing lately, but you know, it's still fairly big. That's why I used it as a test. It's a good example. It's something most of you will want to use. You now know you don't have to do any work, because our MySQL module is pretty much the most favorite one on the Forge. It works. It does all of the things. I think last time I looked, it has like 60 different variables in its parameterized class, you know, and they're all tested. So Beaker. Let's have a look what makes it up. I'm going to start from where I think you'll want to start, because you don't want to test against my node set. Our default node set for our MySQL is Red Hat 6. Who's using Red Hat 6? Wicked, so that's what, 12 people out of the room? That means the rest of you want something else, right? So, host file. It's just a PC YAML. It's just data. It basically, if you've ever used Vagrant with Vagrant YAML, it's effectively taking that process. So we give the config, but all we do with Beaker is Beaker consumes the YAML no matter what and puts it to whatever the provider you want to use, whether it's a virtual host, Vagrant, Docker, and it feeds them through. And out of the box of our supported modules, there's a Red Hat box and a Debian box, because we know that's the popular two in our world. So who uses Debian? A couple of the people, yeah? So I'm still missing some people. Who wants a Windows box? No, nobody's that brave yet. Okay, fair. But you could do it. It will work. We have Rob Reynolds, and I'm sure he's testing on Windows boxes. But this is where it gets a bit finicky. So, who uses Ruby? Language number 1. Who uses Puppet? Language number 2. Who uses RSpec? Language number 3. And then who's going to try use Beaker for DSL number 4? There you go. So if you're not using any of these, you've got 4 languages to kind of learn. Have a nice day. It's not that hard, though. Who's written a piece of original RSpec in the last year? Really? Or did you copy and paste it and change the title and the bits you wanted? Right then, there we go. And that's exactly the same for Beaker's DSL. It's there, it's powerful, and it can do everything you want it to do. If any of you actually have to write a piece of it when there's 14 plus modules already available in our Forge, I'll be bloody amazed. So let's have a look at that. Let me see if I can get this browser window over here. That's better. Let's put that over there. So you find Beaker, and unlike a lot of people, we've actually used GitHub's wiki and put some doco there and actually written some doco. The API is really limited at the moment, the DSL. Look, point your light. But it is a DSL, and that means it's repeatable, because once you put the DSL in place, whether you're testing a Red Hat box or a Debian box, you get the same thing. Put it on a Windows box, you get the same thing. Put it on a hard piece of tin, you get the same thing out of the DSL. And all our DSL's for in this is to allow you to do common tasks. Factor facts, hero data, push the test, make it a master, make it an agent, make it a host. Just sensible things. And in a way where if you decide you want a new piece of funky functionality, go on then, send us a ticket, write some functionality. Crack on, it's all good. Somebody will have a look at it, decide you're a lunatic, maybe merge it, we might have some new features. Let's make that a bit bigger. But like RSpec, you name your tests and you identify what they're doing in English. Yeah? Verify auth.conf does not contain auth no. Make sure it's authing. Yeah? Confine your platforms. So if you don't want that test to run on a different platform because maybe you have crossed servers, maybe you're running a CentOS master and Debian agents, you can make it do that. Yeah? I'm not going to go through all of them. You're all adults. You can all read. Yeah? It's there. It does work. But what it gives you is repeatability, which is what we're after. And Beaker-rspec, it's no different. It's just RSpec. Take the RSpec you've already got in your tests and wrap it in the Beaker DSL, and it will work. Yeah? Describe creating a database. Do it. There you go. Piece of RSpec. Job done. Yeah? You know, so again, you're not going to have to write 100 bits of new RSpec. You're just going to copy pasta. You're going to move them across to something a bit more powerful. And now instead of having to tell your dev team that they have to go and find a server, log into the server and run their test properly, they hit one button, write one command, and it just runs and does all of that for them. And you've controlled the server for them. You've given them the server spec they want. How many times, who's ops guys? Yeah? How many times have you been asked, what's this on that server? Yeah? How many times do you do something you would like to give somebody self-service? All the rest of you are then dev guys or managers watching this. How many times have you had to ask that question and got really infuriated when you can't have the answer? Because all you want to know is the amount of RAM on the goddamn box. Yeah? I worked in a world where we just gave everybody self-service because I didn't want to answer questions. And that's what this gives you, because you can write those node specs and they will then get what is a live-like server in Vagrant by just clicking run. And they can answer the questions by going, read the YAML file. It'll take you a little bit of time to work that out, but that's what you do. Spec helpers. Anybody who's done RSpec knows what a spec helper is. And it's just that outside of your test, there are some common tasks that are not common enough that we've put them into a DSL. And some of them will probably end up in Beaker's DSL because they're common tasks. So you write a spec helper, And it can do quite a lot of things, and some of them do absolutely nothing. They just say spec helper and point to a folder, so you know that your paths are right. But they're a thing to be aware of, because without your spec helper, things don't work so well. But if we go have a look, back over here. So if I cd to spec folder, and cd to acceptance. So in the MySQL, I've got all of these tests. Yeah, that's my acceptance set. You can see I've got my node sets as well. They are there all ready for me. So if I do, that's what's coming. Ubuntu, Fedora, Scientific Linux, and the default, as I said, is a CentOS 64 32-bit on that one. But you can test all the rest there if you want to, just going backwards a little bit. The spec helper upper folder. Yeah, there it is. So you can see that I've got spec helper, and then I've got a specific one for acceptance. So what's the special snowflake status of acceptance that it needs its own spec helper? Yeah, well, it's not that much. It's telling me that we've not got support for Windows Solaris and AIX in there. So if somebody tries firing it against one of those, it'll give you a message and say, don't play. It's got the environments that it wants to run against. So Beaker provision. Install Puppet Enterprise. Otherwise, install Puppet. So it can do open source or it can do Enterprise Puppet. We're not holding back. We're playing with all the toys. And on each host, just do this. Give me a module directory. Let's do it in a piece of bash. We're just firing command. And then some config. And we just know that that's always the same. We're going to add Puppet path for Hera because we're going to use Hera. We're going to install the standard lib module for the acceptance test because we need those. And for some reason, we're going to use EPEL as well. And it's just working out what's in these acceptance tests. So if you want certain things you always want in your setup, that's what that's for. But we've got a command line interface because we don't expect you to write it all out, test it, spend 20 minutes debugging that. We expect you to try it because that's what you do, right? You want to try it quick, make sure it works, and then you want to commit it. Because those of you who said you've written testing, it's hard, right? It is. Anybody who tells you testing is not hard, they're wrong. They're either wrong or spoilt. I'm never quite sure which. They've either had all their tests written for them, or they work with somebody who's just a testing Nazi and writes all their tests for them and they don't realize the value of that person. And when they try and write their own tests, they get really bored and end up playing foosball in the dev room. Okay, that's how it works. And the command line is there to let you try those things before you have to commit a file, push a file, run a file. It just means you can be on a box and hacking tests out because you can run them at command line, see if they work, then commit them to your code, and then push them up. And we found that was a valuable thing because it meant we had a halfway house that meant you didn't have the 3 stages of going git, commit, add, push, run it over onto the box, test. You just had run, worked, failed, died, wrong, or got a typo. It'll take a file, it'll do things. So it's a really good piece of RSpec to be aware of. And you just run it from command line. Just like I executed it. I've got my test, I'm running my test. I don't have to have all the rest of the setup. I'm just running that one test on the box, live, bang, done. And that's the nice thing about Beaker, it's just repeating that. Another demo. You've just seen the demo. You can have a look at that as many times as we like. That's the other nice thing about it. The test doesn't go away. Hey, look, it did run. 25 minutes, 29 seconds. So it finally ran while we were chatting, while we were talking. It took a bit of time, but it ran. See, live demos do work sometimes. And you can check, because I get a log file, I can see that the results of this test were exactly the same as the result of the test that I blue-peated for you earlier. Less testing? Depends what you're testing. This tests everything in that MySQL module. I've just set it raw. I've not set run a limit. I've run every test in MySQL. It's run all my unit tests. It's run all my lint tests, so it knows all my code is right. Then it runs all my unit tests to know all my code is there. Then it runs all my acceptance on the server that it can do all of the things. So it's just gone off to the internet and installed MySQL. It's then built a database. It's then run a user update. It's deleted a user. It's deleted a table. It's added a table. It's configured a table. It's changed the MySQL config, and then run it all again. Yeah. Say that again, sorry.
Sorry, would you envision running this when you update a module, when you build a new server, or both?
I think that depends on your working pattern.
Okay.
Yeah. If I was updating the module, I'd be running these every time I made changes, because otherwise you'll get ahead of yourself and find out you broke it 10 days ago. But when I used to work for EA, we used to run the tests that we wanted to run in live. So I wouldn't run the unit tests. I know the things are there. I know that I've tested them. I know they work. But has anybody worked with AWS? Yeah? Okay, have you ever had the situation where your whole hard drive that you've got mounted on the back end just disappears? Yeah, that's what running those tests in live would tell me. Even if I wasn't clever enough to be monitoring them because for some reason I'm mad, that's why we used to run them all. Because you could have your monitoring and it would say, yes, you have a terabyte hard drive. And what AWS was telling you is, actually, no, you have a terabyte mount point. The hard drive has gone somewhere else. And it's the point where these tests run and they try to run the table and write it to the MySQL folder and it fails to write, that shows up. Yeah? And that's why it depends on your working practice. Yeah? But I would be testing the module as I worked, and then in live, certain tests I would hold for that. You know, because you'll soon work out which ones don't change between dev and live and which ones actually give you benefit in live, like working out that you can't write to a space because it has dropped off the face of the earth because Amazon's lost an availability zone. Go on then.
Kind of part one. Can you test to multiple kind of targets? Can you test locally with Vagrant and then go, okay, I need to test somewhere else to be more realistic?
Your node set file will let you nominate multiple nodes. You can just fill it in with YAML and it will load through all the boxes. So you can do a full master, multiple agents on different platforms, walk away, go make some coffee, let it run.
Or you could test it on Vagrant, you're like, okay, that's all good, but in order to really test it, I need to test it in EC2 as well.
But you can do that in the same file. You can either do them as separate node sets or the same node set. I could have one node that is EC2 and one node that is Vagrant and run the test.
If you want to write tests that check for like minimum requirements, how does that work when you're running it on like Vagrant, where you're not going to have like 8 cores and 64 gigs?
You just tell it what I showed you in the spec helper, where you say if virtual is this because it accepts Puppet facts. So if virtual is Vagrant, don't do these. And if it's real, go do this. So you can tell you've set them up right. So tools for that reusability, because it doesn't all just work like that. Bundler, yeah? Managing the Ruby application dependency. Bundler's a thing that's been around forever. You write your Puppet file and you give it to everybody. Saves you doing it every time. Rake gives you a ton of workable tools. Yeah? Rake comes from Puppet. For those of you using PuppetConf and if you run Rake, you get most of these. We haven't put that many extra ones in. The extra ones we put in is that spec now goes to Beaker, not to rspec Puppet. And just made some changes, really. But the one tool that I do want to cover is the Puppet module skeleton. So if you do Puppet module generate a-test, that's what you get at the moment. A README file, a Rake file, a manifest, a metadata, and a spec. And it wasn't like that about 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago, it was just a manifest and a tests folder and a README file. And I think that's changed again. It's not a README MD anymore. It's now just the metadata JSON. I think the README's taken out. They've been changing this quite a lot recently as Ryan and his team. It gives us a couple of specs, gives us an init spec, gives us a really basic spec helper. You know, doesn't fill anything in on them. But it's a start. Well, we did a really good job of not promoting this. Okay, don't know why, just did. If you've got Puppet installed and you go have a look under .puppet-var Puppet module on your box that's got Puppet installed, you'll find nothing. There's nothing there. And that's because the default skeleton is actually in the code base. And it just generates it out. If you do get brave and put some in there, ERB templates, Ruby files, all of the things, gem file, rake file, it will actually pull them through and make those your skeleton. So if you use the module skeleton folder, and that's what my spec folder in there looks like, which is quite a lot bigger than this one, they're all the things I get. And that, as I said to you, is a Beaker setup. I've got node sets, I've got a class spec, I've got some classes tests, I've got a couple of spec helpers. So let's have a look at that, because I like it. It's a good thing. Oh, that slide hasn't. Okay. So there is on my GitHub module skeleton, and there is on Gareth R's blog when I get to it. He's actually got a full blog piece on it, which is worth following through for how to put the module skeleton in place. But what this actually gives us, so let's just see where I left this machine. This is where the live demos all start to fail. So Puppet module, this again. Yeah, I've got my module skeleton module in the middle of there somewhere. So if we go have a look, actually in the file we mentioned, let's go see what I've got in there, and we can rip it out and put it back, just to show you. So we're going to have a look in my .puppet and see what's actually in there. .puppet file. So I've got a Puppet module there, so I've obviously got something in there. Let's just pull this over. Let's spell tree right for a start, that helps. Yeah, so I know I've got a skeleton. I know I've got quite a big skeleton. Yeah, so this is Gareth's skeleton pulled through. In fact, this is a hack of Gareth's skeleton that actually pulls in all of our skeleton that we're using at Puppet Labs. But you can see it's massively bigger than what you expect. So it's got contributors, it's got a changelog, gem file, a guard file, module file, the README, the rake file, but I've got a files folder. I've got a sample set of providers and types as well. I've got sample manifests, I've got a sample spec, and sample class tests. Because I've got acceptance tests, class tests, as well as templates and my init. And that just means that if I do a test, just to give it a name, and I'll just give it all the defaults, because if you've used the Puppet module generate, you know that. And then if I tree a test, that's what I get. All the files I've just showed you, built, done, there. The really nice thing about what Gareth's done and what the people who've actually contributed, if you actually go have a look at Gareth's module, you'll see that it's got hundreds of contributors who've added things to it, and that's why it's grown at the exponential size it has. It's really interesting stuff. But it's when we do this. So if we do spec, classes, example, is spec classes in it? Yeah. Oh, I'm in the wrong folder, that's why. So, I just put that in there, yeah, I have. That was a boo-boo. Don't put your module inside your other module. Doesn't work very well, doesn't like it. So let's do that again. Yeah, so if we less spec, classes, example spec. It's actually written all of the tests you need for the classes, test params, test install, test config, test service, test, giving it the right name as well, because they're templated out in ERB. So if test was actually a package in Linux, that would work. No, nothing else needed, nothing else to do. It just works for us. And if you've not seen it, That's Gareth's blog. For those who know Gareth, he now works for us. We liked him that much.
You did a presentation last hour.
Yeah, yeah. Well, he's quite proud of it. It works. It's a good thing. But it's there. So let's move on with this. So how do we put all that together? Yeah. Well, we install the module skeleton. Yeah. Which, as I say, what I've written is half a module for Puppet to actually let you install it as a user base, which means I can throw my skeletons around really easily. It's actually quicker than Gareth's way of doing it because he's using Rake and things outside of Puppet. It means you've got to learn that. Generate a model, run the initial tests. You know. What do we need for this? We need Puppet for a start, which you're all kind of here for Puppet, so that's not a hardship. I'm going to need Vagrant because I'm running Vagrant, but all you need is your node set, your testing environment, that piece of work, which you might be using a Debian box and Vagrant might be cool and it's there for you. You might be using a syntax box and Vagrant might be there and it's cool for you, but you might be using Docker. You might be just wanting to test it on AWS, so you're going to have a little bit of work to do, or you're going to have to find somebody else's work and borrow that like we all do. You're going to want Bundler installed, yeah? And we're going to need the module skeleton. So, you know, we start in Beaker with the nodes. Well, I've got them already. They're in my module skeleton, so I don't need to do that. It's done for me. Makes this really quick, yeah? Those are the defaults. I'm going to use the default server. I'm going to do the NTP module. I'm actually going to do it. I'm going to change folders so I'm in the right place, otherwise it'll embarrassingly not work. Which, you know, that's always a good way to do a live test, I find. But if I do that, I do this, and I ls that folder, yeah, there's some random bits of work. Just make sure I haven't got an NTP folder left in there. That's a good thing. So if I do Puppet module generate a-ntp, let's do that. I'm going to give it all the defaults, because as I said, I'm not here to show you the README file. I'm then going to move that NTP folder, because anybody who's used the module tool knows that's one of the little quirks with it, that it wants a username. Yeah. So if I now do Puppet module list, I should see NTP. Yeah, there we go. It's popped up under my module skeleton, thankfully, because of alphabetizement. And let's have a look at it. Let's see what we've actually got in it, though. So if I go, I've got that. I've got some manifests. What's in the init? I've got my class NTP. I know that's right. I've not had to do any work. I've not even had to lint check it because I know that the skeleton I'm passing around is right. First job done. If anybody's ever done our fundamentals, anybody have Gary for their fundamentals? No? Gary does a big thing about telling you that that's the big mistake everybody makes. They forget to call the init class and the class name of the module and it becomes a thing. We've just solved all of your devs' problems with that. I know the package name and I'm pulling in params. So I've got proper classification of params. So if you're trying to learn Puppet, there you go. Here's some examples for you to actually read and play with. And I've got it set up. Because it's the init and we're using a container type class in there, they've gone, let's do this, install, config, service. So let's go have a look at the install, because that's obviously where we're going to. That's actually what we want to see. Because what's nice with how this is done is, there you go, NTP package name, ensure present. Let's have a look in that params file. Let's see what's in that. Package MTP, service name NTP, Red Hat, Amazon, package name is still NTP. Default that your operating system is not supported. I've got an NTP package. I've got it all there. Let's CD. What have I got in for my Beaker support? Well, I've got my gem file, so I know it's there. So let's do that then. This is where things get brave. Let's see what happens. Ooh. This is where it might take a little bit of time. And while it's doing that, we're just going to open another window. I've got my rake file, which is just that, because this isn't the Puppet Labs one, this is Gareth's one. It's really short. It's just pulling in rake tasks, rake helper. Yeah. So what happens when I type the word rake? Probably nothing at the moment because it's not installed yet. Yeah. No, we did. There we go, rake's in. So I can see what I get for free. The rake file's not even big. I've got all these things back already. The only thing I'm waiting for is that bundler install to give me the bits that I really want. There we go, it's installing. There goes Docker API. Here's Factor just to make sure. Here's Puppet Lint because we want to be able to test that. You know, it's just pulling them in, it's putting them in. And it's putting them in reference to that folder so they're local to it. You're not causing destruction. So let's see what other bits of Beaker I've got. Well, let's have a look at this. Let's do less spec. Acceptance. Class spec RB. So I've just got a class spec. Class should be NTP. Package should be NTP. Service should be enabled. Service should be running. Can't get much simpler than that, really, can you? There's no config file for NTP. You can have one. I could decide that I want a different time zone, put a one-liner config file in, add it to my class, add it to this as a one-liner that just said describe file, ntp.config, it should be a file, it should contain this. But I'm not doing that. That's a thing you can do. So let's just go back to bundle. How are we doing? Oh, look, there we go. No errors, no bright red text. Seem to be all right. So let's have a look. Here's the brave moment. So bundle, exec, rspec, spec, acceptance. Pulls in a vagrant box. I haven't blue peated this bit. I didn't want to. Gareth's default is Ubuntu, not Red Hat. You can see that straight away. I know what I'm testing against. I'm going to leave it a little bit. Anybody got any questions on that while we see if it works? Because I like live demos. I love failing. It's just part of my day. But anybody got any questions on any of this so far? Does it make sense? Can anybody see the value in being able to give all of your tests set up to everybody who does your tests? Yeah? Make it self-service. I hope that Ubuntu server passes through, because that's what I haven't checked. It's where we find out Ubuntu's down on its server for 10 minutes and it all goes a bit wrong. But we'll find out. It's fine. In fact, I think it's our vagrant box for Ubuntu that's getting pulled down. Yeah, there are variables to tell it not to kill them. You can run the test once, and then it'll run them. There are variables to tell it to do this. What I know is that in Gareth, it has a destroy as part of the API, so every time it runs the test, it destroys what's there and starts again fresh.
If it doesn't do that, is there like a teardown? So you can
yeah, that's what the destroy is. You can manually destroy it from command line as well, or you can destroy it in normal vagrant commands, or there is a destroy flag, effectively, you can tell it. So we're running the test. Generated the module, showed you the output, showed you all the things are in place for running the test. We're running the test, we'll leave it running and we'll see what happens. I can go get a real drink now because I'm leaving my test. And that'll take a little bit of time to run. It's unfortunately the nature of this, as I said. So what comes next? What do you have to do? Well, we're going to wait for this test to run, hopefully. You might not be that bothered, that's fine by me. Do you all work out that how easy it is now to test those supported modules? Even though we've told you they're supported and you can have some faith in them, you can go have your own faith. Yeah? You can check them against your operating system as long as its support is there. And if you're one of these people who's paying us for Puppet Enterprise and you have our support and your module isn't there, you can send a ticket with your node set saying, can you put this in, thanks? Have a nice day. You can see that we can use the Puppet module skeleton to give you a world where you can pass these tests around between all of your teams and only do the work once. You don't have to work it out every time. You don't have to install the things every time. You don't even have to do the shipping of the code anymore because you can do it locally. So you don't even have to have the Git repos available. You can do it on Vagrant, on your machine, on the train, while you're going home, sat there with your beer at the end of the day. Showed you how to generate a module to test that. Once you've put the skeleton in place and used all this reusability tooling that's available to you, you can start working along. Best place for you to start is the wiki. I know I joked about the document not being kept up to, but it's self-documenting. The code is really good and it's there. You can read through it and find the things. But the documentation that is there is all the things I've just showed you. It works. You know, you can go have a look in the supported modules. You can read all of their comments and code, and you can test them for yourself on different platforms. You can just go check them against anything you like. The URL for the talk is there. Pull it down. The commands and stuff I've run are all in the notes piece, in the PDF and on the thing. If any of you have used Show Off, it generates a PDF of itself. So you can get all of the command lines in case you can't forget them, all of the examples in the order I've run them. I hope you learned a little something to take away. All I can say is thank you for bothering with me, listening to my bad English accent and the little bits where I rush. Yeah, it's terrible. It's not as bad as his. There's some credits there if you want some more links. There is a link to Gareth's blog, link to the Forge in case you forget, another link to this talk just in case, a little credit for the photo I used because I hate people who just randomly steal photos off the internet. And if you keep an eye on PuppetConf, there's this rumor that my audio might be on there in case you can't forget any of my witticisms. In fact, that looks like a camera I may have to hide. And that's it. Thank you very much.